Hello. In this video, I am going to talk to you a little bit about strategies for CapSim. This is to tie together the discussions about strategy in general, business strategies in general, that we've had with how that might tie in specifically to the CapSim capstone simulation. So if you recall, um, in the strategy discussion, we talked about 5 strategies. You could be a cost leader or a differentiator, which could either broad or niche. And remember that a cost leader is someone who is primarily focused on managing cost and therefore competes on price. A differentiator is somebody who's primarily focused on differentiating their product in terms of features and so competes on the quality. And you're either broad or niche, depending on whether you're doing that across everything or only in certain segments. And then you can be focus if you decide to be quality in some segments and focus on low cost leadership and therefore price in others. Here, we sort of expand that concept by thinking in terms of, in CapSim, what are the quality segments? Generally, the high performance and size segments. The price criteria has a relatively low percentage rating on it. It's certainly not the number one or number two thing that they care about. And usually the positioning and materials rank very high in these, as might the age, and the age needs to be low in this case. And so that would indicate that they expect you to keep innovating the product quite a bit. In the price segments are really the low and traditional, where price is an important consideration. It's either number one or number two, and quite frankly, there's less drive usually to innovate the product. Maybe the position requirements move very slowly, or the customers just don't value positioning and quality or materials that highly. You'll just kind of have to take a look at it. So what are the implications? Well, if you're going to compete on quality, then you need to be first or second in size, performance, materials in that segment. Those are sort of the 3 big quality features. Age may matter. You'll want to make sure that you check that. In order to keep the size and performance up, you're going to have to do regular R&D updates, which means you'll sort of get a low age anyway because you're going to have to do updates pretty much every year. And that probably means you're going to have to limit automation because the more automation you have, the longer each R&D cycle takes. And you don't want to be having R&D cycles that run longer than a year on the one hand, but you also don't want to have R&D cycles that don't make site changes in size and performance that'll keep up with the rest of your competitors on the other hand. So you'll have limited automation, and that means you'll have higher labor costs. Just can't help it. The other implication is you're going to want better materials. Better materials also have higher material costs. By the way, if you look at it in the team guide, you'll see that the more advanced your size and performance specs are, the higher your material costs are as well. So just by virtue of the fact that you have set your specs higher, the material costs are going to go up. But they're also going to go up if you set your MTBF higher. Since you're setting all of those higher, it means that you're going to be more challenged to be profitable unless you raise your prices. And so you're going to find that you're going to be forced to have prices that are in a higher range. Now, does that mean you have to be at the top of the acceptable price range? It does not. Does it just because things are expensive, does that mean that you have to be the most expensive? Doesn't mean that at all. But if you're going to compete on quality, then you're probably going to wind up being the most expensive. If you're going to compete on cost, then that means that you need to keep your material and labor costs low and your SG&A expense low, which is where your marketing spend goes. So that means you're going to have lower labor costs. In order to get that, you have lower automation. Lower automation slows your amount of R&D that you can get done in any single year, and so you're going to not be able to keep up as much on R&D. Now, there's a TQM module that kicks in round 3 for us, and takes about a year or two for it to really start impacting R&D times. But once it kicks in, it can cut your R&D times by 40%, and so perhaps once you get to rounds 5 or 6, you might be able to add some automation and still keep up on your specs, but in the short term, you just can't. In addition to lowering labor costs, you want to lower material costs. As I said before, you can do that by having a lower MTBF. You also have lower material costs if you're a little bit further behind on your size and performance specs. Because those are the material costs are related to that as well. You also would like to keep your sales general administrative low. So you need to manage your marketing budgets a lot more carefully. You can't just go in and spend. You need to spend enough in the segments that you're competing on cost, to keep your accessibility and awareness competitive with everybody else. But if you overspend them, then you're not going to be able to compete on price as well with them. And you want generally to capitalize on that strategy. You need to make sure that you're setting prices that are equal to or maybe slightly less than the next lowest price competitor. Remember, in this case, you don't have to have the lowest price possible. You just have to have a price that's as lower than your competitor. You don't have to be the best. You just have to beat everybody else. Now, at that same time, you do still have to maintain some acceptable size and performance specs, which means they do still have to be inside the fine cut. They don't have to be the best, and they don't even have to be better than everybody else's, but they do have to be inside the fine cut. And they need to be inside the fine cut for the whole year. Now, if you think about that in terms of the customer preferences in CapSim, you'll see that for the low end, they really care about price and they care about age, but they want an old age. They want an age of like 7 years old. And so quite frankly, that's the equivalent of saying you can't keep changing position because if you did, you would keep cutting the age in half. And so there's a trade-off there. This is worth more. And so quite frankly, the smart right thing to do is to focus on that and just not make much changes. Given that, that's really a pure price category. The traditional segment, the most important thing is age. In this case, they want a 2-year age. So you can do that by basically updating your product kind of every other year. So not super important on positioning. Price is important. Positioning is also important, but you can keep up with it on a little bit slower basis. So I call that price plus. So it's like a little bit higher quality than low end. But really still most of this is about price. It's not really a quality focus. If we look at the high end and also the size, on both of those, the positioning is worth 43%. Age, which they want to be very low, which comes from regular repositioning, is 29%. Reliability is 19%. So combined, positioning and materials drive 91% of the buying decision in those two categories. Very clearly quality. You could only pick up 9% of that segment for price considerations. The performance is a little bit different than that. Reliability and positioning are important. Age is not as important, but price does matter a little bit. And so here, I think you're looking at 72% is basically driven off of quality. Maybe it's a quality plus. I don't know. You want to be a little bit sensitive to price, but primarily it's a quality segment. So if you think about matching your strategies to your segments in whatever way, that's going to lead you to a set of choices. Do I attack that particular segment? Do I defend it or do I retreat? When I say attack it, that's what you would do with a segment where you want to be the big market share in that segment. Okay, if you are going to attack a segment, then you may increase your production capacity. That would be a signal. I need to be in a position to make more because I expect to sell more. Depending on whether it's a quality or a price segment, you may move your specs and try and be way out ahead of everybody, or you may lower your costs and prices. So you might see a lot of automation in order to reduce cost, or you may see them move to a very low MTBF to reduce cost. You may see them lagging on specs to reduce cost. You may see them set their prices lower, signaling that they plan to compete on price and cost. So all those would be saying I am attacking on a cost basis. If I'm really going out and saying I might even lower my automation, I don't know. But if I'm going out and really putting out specs that are as aggressive as you possibly can be, then I'm probably attacking on quality. In either case, if you see me add a new product to a segment, that's a clear sign that I'm attacking that segment. If you see me maybe shifting the specs of existing products that are in other segments so that they start moving towards this segment, I'm probably repositioning them into this segment, and that's sort of a sign that I'm attacking it. What about defend? How do I defend a segment? Defending it means I'm not necessarily going to grow it market share wise, but I don't want to give up my market share either. So I need to at least hold my own. And so in that case, I may not increase production capacity a lot, maybe a little bit, but quite frankly, I'm also not cutting it. Okay, so you'll see me sort of holding my own on production capacity once I get to the point where I'm at the kind of 150% range of production capacity utilization. You might see changes in automation, marketing spend, price, or specs, but they'll be more in the pack, meaning sort of in the middle of what everybody else is. I'm not necessarily trying to be the leader. I just want to make sure that I'm sort of moving with the trend of the market. And certainly if I'm defending, I'm not adding new products. And I'm not repositioning products into this market, but I'm not repositioning this product out either. And then retreat, surest sign of retreat is that I start decreasing my production capacity below demand if I'm truly just going to get out of it, or I start repositioning the product into another segment. So I'm going to just shift out of it. If you see me also stop producing, so if I'm just selling off whatever inventory I have, that might be a sign of it. And clearly, if I sell off production completely at some point, I've retreated. So retreat is the concept that basically says, I started out in this segment because I was in all of them, and maybe I want to be a niche player, so I'm going to get out of this one and get into another one. Or I've looked around and I thought I wanted to maybe defend this segment, but quite frankly, there's just too many people attacking it, and it's too expensive for what little bit of share I'm getting, and so I'm going to give it up. So what might be the strategy implications for this then? If I'm a broad cost leader, then that means I am going to still attack all 5 segments, right? But I'm going to attack them with pricing. And so you're going to see me adding automation, you're going to see me doing things to lower labor costs, and you're going to see me at the lower end of the price range than everybody else. If I'm a broad differentiator, then I'm going to attack on quality, so you're going to see me having higher specs than everybody else. You're going to see me maybe have higher materials quality than everybody else. I likely will be higher priced than everybody else. And again, in either of those, if I'm attacking, I may be adding products. If I'm niche, then and I'm a niche cost leader, then I'm going to attack low and traditional. But I am going to retreat out of high performance and size because they're not a good match for the cost leadership strategy. If I'm a niche differentiator, I'll retreat out of low and traditional, but I'm going to attack high performance and size. And if I'm focused, then I'm going to attack low and traditional on the basis of cost. So I'll attack them by adding automation, I'll attack them by lowering material cost. Um, I'll attack them by sort of laying off on specs to keep material costs low and keep the age where I want it to be. And then I will attack the high performance and size on spec. So on those, you might actually see me lower my material costs. Those are good targets in this sort of a strategy for I need to add some new products. So since I can only add 3 new products, I'd probably add them into those sectors. You would see that my prices would be a little bit higher. I might add capacity, number of different things like that. Last thing for you to think about. While you're sitting here trying to figure out your strategies, your competitors are also trying to figure out and execute their strategies. Or maybe they aren't figuring out strategies, which is good news for you as well. If you take the time to look at the behaviors of your competitors and see what they're attacking, what they're defending, and where they're retreating, that might give you a little bit better idea of what their strategies are. If you know what their strategies are, then you can anticipate what they're likely to do in each round. And so that'll help you adjust your strategies in each segment on the basis of that. So for example, you might figure out that out of the other 5 competitors, that 4 out of those 5 are all attacking a particular segment. And based on that, you may say, well, I'm only going to defend it. Or alternatively, you may see that 3 of your competitors are completely retreating out of a particular segment, and that quite frankly, the other competitors haven't recognized that yet. The other 2 haven't recognized that and ramped up, and so it's become a seller's market. There's just not enough inventory being produced to satisfy all the demand, and so you want to step in and produce, even though your product may be not the best product out there. It won't matter because in a seller's market, everything gets sold. So you may step up and make lots of inventory and still price it higher, knowing that your competitors have to buy it either way. So there are all sorts of things in the interim that you can do once you have a little bit better idea what your competitors are doing. So that's kind of the thought process in CapSim of how you might approach both figuring out your strategy, other people's strategy, and taking advantage of knowledge about strategy.